want for like computers that can give you.
To help the freshmen.
GPS on every student, and you can tell where they are in the building.
But aren't there grants and stuff steadily available for that type of thing, for bringing it up to compliance?
There are not. No, not that I'm aware of. I won't say exclusively there aren't, but I'm not aware of any. ADA and bringing buildings up to standards is the responsibility of the building owner.
I know when I was up at tech college, we did a lot of that technology, a lot of the ADA stuff, a lot of that stuff with grants.
Technology back in the day, there's still some rebate funding, and there was what I think was called Teach Grants or something like that, right as the internet and things were coming in. So 10, 12, 15 years ago.
1991.
Is it that long ago?
Yeah, that was Teach Wisconsin.
Oh my God. So there were grants then for that type of stuff. I don't recall any for ADA, but well, look, I'm not aware of any though. All right, how about you two ladies?
A lot of what was said, and as far as storage goes, we thought the girls' locker room, can be used for storage, as well as the courtyard. Is there any way to build sheds in there for storage spaces? You're not going to block the light, and you wouldn't have to have exits for students.
Okay, other?
Number 48 and number 58, they both mentioned that the art area is undersized. 48 and 58.
48 is tech ed and art, yep, and then 58 is art. Yep, you're right.
Fair. And then on the nurse's
There's also
office.
258s.
Oh yeah, there are 258s.
Like wall. Yeah, we didn't understand the first
259 if
58.
you want to get to school too.
Creative learning spaces, yeah.
There's 359.
I'm showing off my Excel skills.
I don't remember.
I'll give you a lesson.
Oh yeah, it's again 59, 60.
One for everyone.
On 69.
Don't concentrate on that.
But that was kind of fun.
48 and 58, I agree, those are overlapping. We'll get those corrected.
69 on the nurse's office.
Yep.
I don't remember touring that. What was the ADAD facility issue there?
I would assume it doesn't have an ADA compliant bathroom connected to it, is that correct?
Which space?
69, the nurse's office.
I don't remember touring it.
No, I don't believe it does.
So no bathroom or no ADA.
Does it meet HIPAA?
I'm sure not. I mean, that is a common challenge nowadays when, in almost every school environment, is when you've got a nurse who has a couple of sick students in a room, and then they call home to a doctor, call home to a parent. There's some overlap there. Many of them will step across a hall. If we were to design a new space, we'll create a room adjacent with a door and a window that they can see so they can go make some calls and be confidential and still observe those students. Again, it's a common challenge across many, many schools, not here, but it's one that if an investment is made, it would be a good one to remedy.
And should that be added?
We sure can, yep. Challenges with HIPAA compliance.
She added Jackson too.
Okay. Good observations. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Final table.
We wondered about the wording on number 34, because there had been discussion before that it was a tank, and then it got clarified here by Dave that they're talking about the age of the pipes that are in that room leaking.
And so we think it should say that aging pipes rather than potential leaks.
We can describe that a little more.
Okay. And number 57, the library space being oversized, when you consider the number of students in those two buildings, those library spaces just meet state standards and suggestions for how big the libraries would want to go. If you want to go to making one library for both of the buildings, then it has to be a room that's at least 1.5 times the size of the current library.
So the consideration from a solution perspective is you're not opposed to one library, so make sure it's one appropriately sized library for the size school. Okay, fair. And I don't think that's anything you guys were disagreeing. We're saying cram them all into one. So I think we're all on the same page there.
Okay, good.
We like the two.
Yeah, okay, fair.
So 34, concern with location of server room. I thought that was a positive that it was on the second floor.
I think it was underneath the HVAC and the water. That was the problem.
And so we never really ever got that diagram.
We provided that at the last meeting.
Actually, I don't know that we have the drawing because,
Okay, what is up in that room are air handlers. And air handlers are essentially metal boxes with fans with large coils in them that circulate chilled or heated water through them. There's also outside air that goes through those coils. There's mixed air from the building. Outside air is brought in to provide fresh air for building occupants. With old units, like those units, a lot of things go wrong and they don't function properly. We are looking at those units constantly to make sure that they're functioning the way they're supposed to. But if a damper hangs up on one of those units on a day when it's 20 below, those coils are going to freeze and they're going to burst. And the pumps are going to keep pumping, so we'll be probably having 80 to 100 gallons per minute flowing into that room. So that's the concern. There's not a tank up there, but there is flowing water, and there is a lot of water going through those coils.
so I thought there was a little computer or stop that
If
they
you
could.
put flood sensors in, you could sense when it starts to flood that you could start to shut down the pumps. Is this a hot water boiler system or a
Yes,
steam
it is.
system? It's a hot water system?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have the inherent danger of diverting the flow from a regular steam boiler, because that's what you get into over temperature and shock issues more so. But you could shut off the pumps, but you'd still have the issue of the water would have to still drain out there and stuff. But it was built properly in that there's 4-inch curbing around all the penetrations for the HVAC ducts. So as long as all other electrical penetrations that may have been added over the years are sufficiently sealed, it should handle a fair amount of flooding before it would actually start to go through ductwork and whatnot. At least.
How much space is between
Between
where you're talking and this computer? I thought they said it was a sizable.
Yeah, it's
like
below
probably-
the air handlers, but
probably 6 inches of concrete.
yeah.
Isn't there at least one drain in that room as well?
There are drains because there's cooling up there. So.
This is one of those issues, and it's like many of these on here. Inherently, in and of itself, you could remedy each individual situation. I think the thought process with identifying these is if we make an investment in this facility, we try to invest in remedy as many of these situations as we can. So for example, if we invest in replacing the HVAC system, do we consider alternatives to locating equipment above that location? Or do we go a step further to protect the equipment below if we keep the equipment in that location? Inversely, if we decide to replace the data cabling because it's now Cat 5 and we're up to Cat 6E or something like that, well beyond, if that's a decision that's made that we want to replace the data cabling to provide today's standards for students and faculty, and we're going to re-pull all that wiring, is that the time to consider potentially relocating the MDF away from that location and pull all of our new data cabling back? So again, each of these individually, I wouldn't personally get totally hung up on how do we solve the separation between the two, but if we tackle one of these individually, the hope would be that we can remedy some of the other challenges that are being caused by that individual issue.
What makes it difficult is the air handlers aren't going to move because there's a lot of infrastructure put into the air handlers being in that location, and it would be a major renovation to move the air handlers. And you end up with the same issue. Over the years, all the infrastructure is built into the IT room below it, so it's a lot of infrastructure that has to get moved to move the IT room. So if moving either one ends up becoming a large project.
Yep.
The best option for the data center is probably if you would maybe push it outside over the roof on that first story only office area. That would get you out from underneath the air handlers, so you would eliminate the issue. You wouldn't be moving everything too far away. You could use the existing space as basically an IDF or a patch bay, so you're not removing all of your infrastructure to different buildings. That'd probably be the only intermediate step you could do to get your data center away from the air handlers with a huge investment.
Keeping it on that outside wall is beneficial too, for bringing it
And I think the air handler that currently services it is on that roof of that first story one. So you'd be able to put another air handler. With the reduction in heating the heating load from the equipment, you could probably run a decent sized split system, so you're not looking at a huge a huge unit to cool that. Redundancy though, because those will run all winter long, you probably would want a secondary backup to run that HVAC system, because you will freeze up an air conditioner in winter on a data center. Because it will run in the middle of winter.
I have a concern.
Yes.